In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics were coming off a year where they went 61-21 in 2024-25 and ended up losing to the Knicks in the conference semifinals. This is where we all saw Jason Tatum go down with a torn Achilles, an unfortunate blow to the team while they were on their run. In the offseason, they drafted Hugo Gonzalez at the end of the first, and then Amari Williams and Max Shulga in the second round. They added Anthony Simons via trade, Chris Boucher is a free agent, Luka Garza is a free agent, and Josh Minott is a free agent. As for the losses, they lost Drew Holiday in that trade for Anthony Simons. Al Horford and Luke Cornett left in free agency. They traded away Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks, and then waived J.D. Davison. The Celtics sold off a number of their core players in the offseason, hinting towards a potential gap year with Jason Tatum expected to miss the whole year. And this was seen by a lot of people, and it was why they came into the season ranked at number 19 in the power rankings, expect for them to miss the playoffs. Now let's get into the season. The Celtics came out and quickly put the gap year talks to rest, going 15-10 in the first 25 games behind an MVP level play from Jaylen Brown. Brown was averaging close to 30 points per game and doing all he could to show that this team was good enough to contend without Jason Tatum. Derek White and Peyton Pritchard were the solidified next two scoring options on this team, and despite a bit of a slow start on the shooting side of things, they provided two-way impact and enough on the offensive end to complement Brown. Peyton Pritchard took a big jump this year. He finally stepped in that starting role with no other point guard competition there. It was showing off playmaking, his tremendous ability to hit shots, as well as being able to sit on defense and guard the other team's point guard. As for Derek White, the shooting was pretty streaky. There's a lot of talk about him having too much of an opportunity, taking too many shots, and that's where the efficiency dropped. But it wasn't too much that was concerning for him as a player. He was definitely playing out of position and in a role that he wasn't usually used to playing. He still provided that defensive impact, being an incredible shot blocker at the guard position. It was just the shooting and efficiency that was taking the biggest hit. But honestly, the biggest story at the start of the Celtics season was the emergence of Neemias Queta. The Celtics did not address their need for a center in the offseason and instead let Queta be the full-time guy, and boy did he deliver. A double-double machine that was also protecting the hoop at an elite level, helping the Celtics tremendously in just about every game. A usual sign that teams going into a gap year is they kind of just don't address the center position, just let whoever play there. The Celtics did that. Neemias Queta wasn't really a big-time player. He kind of bounced around the league a little bit. Wasn't really seen as a guy that was going to be any kind of factor to this team. And then they doubled down on the idea by bringing in Luka Garza to be that backup big. You know, there was definitely a hole in the Celtics center area, but both of them overperformed and gave the Celtics actual meaningful minutes at the big. I do wonder how much of it had to do with the coaching versus the overall development of these two guys, or was it just them being given an opportunity and finally showing what they could do? There was a ton of discussion around what the Celtics were going to do to address the hole in the lineup at power forward without Jason Tatum in the lineup, and it was just assumed that Joe Mazzulla was going to address it with a by committee type of approach, and that's essentially what he did. It was kind of whoever was hot would play. It started with Sam Hauser, then we saw Josh Minott, who came out of nowhere as a defending, rebounding machine before getting hurt, which then allowed Jordan Walsh to slide in, and he was the one that kind of ended up sticking the most, as he was also giving a serviceable offensive output. Really looked solid in that lineup there, definitely showing the Celtics that they have something with him, and he's under contract next year on the team option. I assume they opt in because of what he proved, because of what he showed this year. But yeah, the hole in the power forward position never really was an issue because of how many guys they were able to slide in and out there. Coming into the deadline, the Celtics were sitting at 33-18, close to the top of the Eastern Conference, so it was expected that they were going to be trying to find a center in the trade market. And that's exactly what they did, along with some other deals. They traded away Anthony Simons, who was giving them serviceable output off the bench kind of all season long. A bit streaky, kind of just a shooting guy, wasn't really doing much in defense, but was definitely keeping them competitive. Anyway, they traded him and a second round pick to the Bulls for Nikola Vucevic and a second rounder. This was to go along with a move that sent Josh Minott to the Nets for cash. Chris Boucher got sent to the Jazz with a second rounder for John Tonje, and Xavier Tillman was sent to the Hornets for cash. Just a couple minor moves outside of the big one to bring Nikola Vucevic in, who was kind of stuck on the Bulls roster as an old guy on a young team. And the Bulls were also having a fire sale, so the Celtics took advantage of that. The second half of stretch is where we saw that Celtics depth really come to life. Guys like Bayer Shireman and Hugo Gonzalez started to get some serious rotational minutes and showcase some real promising play on both ends of the court in their respective positions, as well as the development of the two players. These are two guys that I think the Celtics should commit to long-term when the time comes. Bayer Shireman showed incredible ability to be a 3 and D2 guard, and Hugo Gonzalez just does a little bit of everything. He busts his ass on defense, he rebounds, he can hit shots when he needs to, he'll dive to the hoop on a cut. He's kind of just an all-around gadget type of small forward, power forward type of player. The highlight of the second half, though, was the return of Jason Tatum on March 6th. And he did not look like he skipped a beat. He came back and was scoring at an elite level, rebounding great, and even put up one triple-double in his little run there. The Celtics were definitely looking like the team to beat for the Larry O'Brien. They ended up finishing the season with a 56-26 record, which is good for second in the East, and they were definitely considered the title favorites depending on who you asked. They drew the 76ers in the first round matchup and came out looking dominant, taking a commanding 3-1 series lead. But then it all went bad, as they ended up blowing that 3-1 lead and getting eliminated well before anyone expected them to. A very disappointing end to the season that had a ton of promise. But the biggest story of their playoff run was the inability to play Vucevic. They ended up buying at the deadline to bring him in, and he did not look like the same player that they traded for. He was ran off the court by the 76ers and was basically unplayable. A lot to discuss about him in the offseason. As we look ahead in the offseason, the Boston's gap year definitely exceeded their expectations. After losing Jason Tatum to the torn Achilles that I mentioned earlier and dismantling much of his championship core, the Celtics still won 56 games and finished second in the Eastern Conference. The season did end up ending in disappointment, despite surpassing all the expectations during the regular season. Like I said, they blew that 3-1 series lead, first time in franchise history, and with 3 of the 4 losses coming at home. Yikes. But on a brighter note, the core remains intact moving forward. Tatum, Brown, Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard are all under contract, giving Boston a strong foundation as it looks to return to contention. However, it has recently come up that Jaylen Brown might be available via trade, and there are a handful of teams interested like Atlanta, Houston, and even Golden State who came out of nowhere. It seems like every year we talk about the Celtics splitting up Tatum and Brown, but something with the reports this year make it seem like it might actually happen. But unlike last year, the Celtics entered the offseason below the luxury tax and both aprons, giving them significantly more roster flexibility than they have had in recent years. And I think it's because of this that recently they've been noted as a potential suitor for Giannis Antetokounmpo in a trade that would involve Jaylen Brown. A big time story that kind of came out of nowhere, but if it were to happen, it would set the league on fire. Now as we get into some of their extension and player option talks, Neemias Queta became a major success story. Expected to be part of a center by committee approach that I talked about earlier, Queta emerges as a reliable starter, averaging career highs across the board and becoming one of Boston's most impactful players. Boston must decide whether to commit long-term money to Queta, while also determining whether to bring back veteran center Nikola Vucevic in free agency, as front court depth is definitely this team's biggest hole. Peyton Pritchard averaged 17 points and 5 assists while starting 50 games, making his current contract one of the league's best values and positioning him for a future extension. He's honestly become one of the NBA's best bargain players. The Boston Celtics are definitely positioned to add talent this offseason. They own a late first-round pick and several trade exceptions, giving the front office multiple avenues to improve the roster's offseason. The pick they have is at number 27, and based on the players that are expected to go in that range, none of them really fit the need of the Celtics. I think they will look to involve it in a trade to bring in some talent, maybe even Giannis Antetokounmpo. But as for the biggest need for this team, it is definitely depth. The Celtics need additional front court help, more playmaking behind their stars, and continued development from younger players like Hugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, and Jordan Walsh. I do want to note something that's pretty crazy. Key contributors like Peyton Pritchard, Baylor Shireman, Hugo Gonzalez, and Jordan Walsh are all under contract next season, and none of them are making more than $8 million, most of them making even $2 million. The production they're giving is well above what they're being paid. A great place to be in contractually for a team that wants to buy this offseason. The Celtics successfully navigated a transitional season by staying competitive while dramatically improving their financial outlook. But after a historic playoff collapse, the focus now shifts to strengthening the front court and maximizing a core led by Tatum, White, Pritchard, and who knows if Jaylen Brown's there next season.